between them lies. So seek simply to speak to and from the heart. Be deceptively simple. Be clear and be smart. Think only of this as you reimagine and revise. Make the plainness of your speech into an art. Too soon will come the hour for all of us to depart, when the fools will wail, whereas the wise seek simply to speak to and from the heart. There is no other lesson in writing to impart, but to stand on both feet and open both eyes, and turn the plainness of your speech into an art, and seek simply to speak to and from the heart. Q&A, part one. If someone has the internal fortitude to ask the first question. We say teachers don't wait long enough, right, to see if there are any questions. Okay, so the test will be tomorrow, and it will review everything we've discussed so far. Any questions? No? Okay. And you say, no, I had a question. I wasn't ready yet. Sometimes you need a white guy to ask the first question. I used to always be the white guy with the first question. And until a friend of mine said, you know, you ought to wait just a second. There are smart people in the room who might have good questions. And don't just call on like the first white guy to raise his hand. And I went, wait, I'm often the first white guy to raise my hand. And he's like, see, it's always a white guy who, and I said, but I feel like I'm doing the audience a favor. I've always felt like I'm taking the hit. I'm going first. I'm going to be the point man. So.
Just, if you feel comfortable, can you tell us about the day that you decided to stop teaching?
I don't think I finished telling you the story about how What Teachers Make was indirectly, but kind of directly, why I stopped getting insurance, health insurance. I put it up in 1999, I put it up on my brand new worldwide website, which had a lot of pages that said, coming soon, or under construction, with this graphic of a construction worker going like that. And I said, you know, click this button to see an example of one of my poems. And you click the button and it took you to another page that said, What Teachers Make. It didn't say, What Teachers Make by Taylor Molly, and then the text of it, which is what I now do. I always put my name between the title and the text. And I didn't think I needed to do that because, hello, anybody who's reading this is going to be on taylormolly.com, but what I didn't realize is that people would copy and paste it. And that poem spoke to teachers, and if poetry is, to a certain extent, the ability to, what often was thought but never so well expressed, the job of the poet is to give words to feelings that people have always had. And so it got copied and pasted and sent around, it went viral, and it gets, principals rewrite it, and it's been rewritten a couple of times. There are 2 swears in it. I give my finger at the end. Somebody thought that was way too dirty. They cleaned that up. They turned me to a woman named Susan. It's been written. I've read What Firefighters Might. I've read all of these rip-offs and take-offs of that poem. But that was indirectly why I started getting invited to come and give readings at places further and further afield from where I was teaching. In 1999, I was teaching at an all-boys school on 62nd Street on the east side of Manhattan. And I got a call from the director of the student union at a school in North Dakota. I don't remember which one. And he said, I want you to come and read at the union. I have a budget. What would it take to get you to come and read here in April? And I said, ooh, April is a really tough time for me as a 6th and 7th grade teacher. I'll come at the end of June. And he said, I don't want you at the end of June. I don't have any students here. I'll give you $1,000. And I said, no, I really can't do it. And he said, $1,500. And the way to figure out what the cost of something is to be able to walk away. Right? When you are ready to walk away, you find out what the real price is. And I said, I cannot do this. Maybe let's talk in the fall. And his final offer was, I'll give you $2,000. And I hung up the phone and thought, I make $28,500. If I could string 15 gigs like that together in a year, I would make as much money. Now, it's a little bit awkward for somebody whose most famous poem is, how dare you judge me for what I make, to admit that I was making that declaration, but I did. And so that was not the day that I walked away from teaching, but that was the day that I got the idea that it might be possible. And I went into the headmaster the next year and said, after this year, I'm going to take a year off and see whether I can make a living as an artist. And it's scary. It was scary. Not as scary for me. There was a family safety net that was going to catch me if I fell. I was going to be able to put food on the table and pay the mortgage. But it worked out. It worked out.
Thank you.
Do you miss being in a classroom?
That's going to lead me to my next poem, which is called When I Miss Teaching. The short answer, which is in the poem, is every day, all the time. And then, of course, I will. Not all the time. And somebody have something short, a short question while I When I miss teaching. People often ask me if I miss teaching, and the answer is every day, all the time. Well, not all the time. For instance, never before 8 in the morning, unless it was that hour before the students were allowed in the building, that empty hour when I had my classroom all to myself and I could straighten the desks and chairs with such precision that maybe for the first time ever, they would stay that way. I love that time, and I miss it. And although when school starts, I always miss the first day of the year, I never miss teaching on a Monday, which is not the same thing. Unless I would be introducing a new project that I knew would set everyone on fire with curiosity, or real fire. But I never miss teaching in the starving hour before lunch, nor the sluggish hour after. And needless to say, I have never missed teaching during lunch, except the last school where I worked actually had really good food. And everyone knew it, even though the students pretended it was terrible. And now I'm hungry, and hunger always makes me miss teaching. I never miss teaching the period after gym or walking into a classroom after the class that has just had gym. I think it's safe to say that I do not miss the smell of teaching ever, except for rubber cement, new books, and magic markers. I never missed teaching on a Friday, except for those Fridays when half a dozen of us would meet at a bar after school, promise that we wouldn't spend the entire evening gossiping and bitching and moaning about our students, and then do nothing else but gossip and bitch and moan about our students, because there is nothing more fun than drinking beer and talking about the things you love with the colleagues who love them too. I never missed the bells of teaching, neither the first bell signifying the end of class, which we called the ding, nor the second bell, 5 minutes later, announcing the start of the next class, which we called the dong, leading students to say in the hallway, was that the ding or was that the dong? Except for those times when I had planned everything out, done everything I wanted to in class, answered all questions about the homework, glanced at my watch, and noticed that the ding was going to ring in 10 seconds and said, maybe for once I should let you all go to lunch early. Ding! I missed the laughter of my students when I had tricked them into working so hard they lost track of time. I never missed the heartbreak of teaching, nor its tears, nor its drudgery, but the light bulbs and the wide eyes, the birthdays and the cupcakes, the front row seat of the mind as someone thinks about what he or she thinks and why, and how to put it in words. I miss that. I miss that part of teaching all the time, every day. I had a copy of that book right here. Walked over there. Anything else?
I want to hear about your late fatherhood, about your family.
Well, I was born at a very young age. I was married twice before, and both times the women did not want to be moms. And I remember having a pretty messed up view. My godfather would have been a great dad, but he got married in his 40s, and his wife, who was probably in her mid-30s, she was a head of research libraries at Columbia University. She didn't want to be a mom. She didn't want to be a mom. And I remember my mom telling me, yeah, it looks like Edgar and Eileen are not going to have children. I said, oh, he'd be such a great dad. And she said, I know. But, you know, he just decided that if he had to choose between staying married to Eileen and not having kids, and so I grew up thinking, the lesson I learned from that was that for a man, wanting kids and being married to a woman who didn't, that was not what I called a divorceable offense. But I felt the opposite was not true. That if there was a woman who wanted to have kids and her husband was like, no, I don't want to, that she absolutely did have the rights to say, well, if that's, then I'm gone. So I don't scratch too hard into that philosophy. So my first wife was died. And so I call myself, I am a widower, a divorcee, and a newlywed. And my second wife didn't want to have kids, and I was still like not letting myself, I mean, in retrospect, it would have wrecked me. It would have wrecked me later on. But then she left so suddenly. I went to therapy for a while, and I wanted to say that she pulled the rug right out from under me, and I accidentally said, yeah, she pulled the plug right out from under me. And the therapist was like, wait, let's talk about that. So I got married again at age 47, and had my son at 2 months before my 50th birthday. And my wife said, you know, turning 50 is a major accomplishment, and you should have a great party, and no one's going to pay attention to your birthday this year because we got a 2-month-old baby. It was fun. It was fun. And then my daughter came 2.5 years later, and they're wonderful. And I'll say to my daughter, she's like, I'm hungry. I was like, you want ice cream and Jell-O and chocolate cake? No, that was a test. I was like, yes, and you passed. There's a poem in Late Father about, occasionally, my father used to write poems, occasional poems, very rhymey, Dr. Seuss-like poems. He would recite these poems at weddings and birthdays and anniversaries. And so, I grew up watching my dad perform these poems. He never memorized them. He always wrote them out on a yellow legal pad. And I think if he'd lived a little bit longer, I would have encouraged him, you got this. I'll tell you what, I'll sit at your table, and if you ever forget a line, I'll just feed you the line. It would have drastically improved the quality of his performance, because once your paper is free of the hands. Listen to what I mean. Now what I said. Once that paper is out of your hands, you can make eye contact, and your performance comes alive. But he knew the first 3 rules of public speaking: loud, slow, and clear. And so there are a couple of poems in Late Father where both sort of the ghost of my father and my son appear in the same poem. There was one morning up in Connecticut, my parents bought an old farm in Connecticut that we used to go to for weekends and summers. And when I lost both my parents they were 5 years apart in age, and they died 5 years apart. And so I knew that they were pretty close to having lived the same exact lifespan in days, but nobody really calculated it because I would be the only person who cared. And but I did it. I'm really into genealogy, and so I figured out that in Microsoft Excel, a spreadsheet, if you subtract somebody's birthday from their death day, which is weird, like you're making a mathematical equation using dates, which are not integers, but nevertheless, if you subtract April 3rd, 1932, from July 5th, 1990, it returns the number of days that person has been alive. So I did it for my mom, and I did it for my dad, and then I figured out the delta between those two. They lived to within 29 days of the exact same lifespan, although they died 5 years apart. So we cremated both my mom and dad, and their ashes are buried on the property up in Connecticut, down by a river. Nice little place. We have two stone, not gravestones, but little markers with a quote there. And I took my son down there when he couldn't sleep one morning. I was down there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there were pine needles on covering my father's name and dates. My father's name is Alan, and my son's name is Aaron. So we sort of named him. He sort of named him. And I wrote this poem about Aaron sweeping the pine needles from the grandfather that he didn't get to meet at his gravestone. Should I read that? Okay. This, I'm going to just say one thing about things that are for sale. Everything on that table is $15. But if you buy 2 of them, it's $25, and 3 of them, it's $30. I'll tell you what the greatest deal is. The greatest deal would be on this hardback, which is usually $20, and boxes of medical vests, which are also torn. So that's that. And Megan is going to be running my little credit card machine. So that's that. It's called To Better See the Letters of Your Name. For A.M. Aaron, Molly, Alan. Although I don't publicly say, I don't publicly say on social media what my son's name is. I call him Aragorn. And people are like, your son's name is Aragorn? Like, for you? Yes. But not really. To better see the letters of your name. Your grandson brushed pine needles from your name in the woods, from the carved stone marker where we buried your ashes. A grandson you never met, which is all of them, born after you died. So let me rather say, by my son, I have a son named after you. Which might be why he cried all night and hardly slept, or why he swept the granite marker clear to better see the letters of your name, or do the math of missing you by how many years. He's quiet now, his tears, like you, are gone. At your grave this morning, in this stand of old white pine between the stone wall and the abandoned railroad track, your grandson cleared your name of needles with his hands, and then, before we left, he put them back. When am I supposed to end? 10:30. Okay. There's a broadside of this poem, which is called Undivided Attention. It's not loud. It's one of my teacher poems. It's not loud and anthemic like Miracle Workers or What Teachers Make, but it is one of my favorite poems about teaching. And this broadside, feel that, run your fingers across that. You know that? It's like my printer